Picture yourself on a Friday night, sometime in the 1970s or 80s. You have saved up for weeks to buy 2 concert tickets. You get dressed, drive an hour, find a spot to park, stand in a long line, and finally push through the doors into that electric crowd. The lights go down, the crowd roars, and then the band walks out. And something is very, very wrong. The singer is stumbling, the drummer is pale as a sheet, the guitarist is staring at the floor like he forgot where he was. That sinking feeling is something a lot of folks in this audience probably remember firsthand. You paid good money, gave up a whole evening, and the person on that stage was somewhere else entirely. Tonight, we are going to talk about 10 times musicians were genuinely too far gone to perform. Some of these stories are funny in hindsight. Some are sad. All of them are worth remembering, because they tell us something true about the price of fame, the culture of excess that surrounded certain eras of rock and roll, and occasionally the heroism of strangers who stepped in when things fell apart. If you want a longer look at the history behind any of these moments, there is a companion guide linked in the description. It is free, no strings attached, and I will not mention it again. Number 1. Keith Moon, San Francisco, 1973.
But the world looks just the same.
This one is almost impossible to believe if you were not there, but it is one of the most documented stories in rock history. The Who were playing the Cow Palace, and someone, to me, it has never been entirely confirmed who, slipped a powerful sedative into Keith Moon's drink before the show. By the time he sat down behind his drum kit, he was already in trouble. He made it through a few songs before he simply collapsed. Pete Townsend walked to the microphone, looked out at a crowd of thousands, and asked if anyone in the audience knew how to play drums. A 19-year-old named Scott Halpin raised his hand, climbed on stage, and finished the set. Moon was carried off and treated backstage. The show went on. That night became the stuff of legend, not just for Moon's near catastrophe, but for the quiet courage of a teenager who sat down behind those drums and held it together. Number 2. Jim Morrison, Miami, 1969.
The rain, when you stray, no one remembers your name.
Morrison had been unraveling for months before the Doors took the stage at the Dinner Key Auditorium. That night, he was clearly in no condition to perform. He rambled, he taunted the crowd, he seemed genuinely disconnected from where he was. The show deteriorated badly. He was later charged with indecent exposure and profanity, though those charges were disputed and he maintained his innocence. Regardless of the legal outcome, the performance itself was widely described by people who attended as chaotic and painful to watch. Morrison died just 2 years later at 27. Miami was, by many accounts, the beginning of the end for one of rock's most gifted and troubled voices.
If I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher.
Number 3. Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd, mid-1960s.
I'm not here, and I never knew you could be so.
Barrett was the original creative force behind Pink Floyd, a genuinely brilliant songwriter who helped build one of the most inventive bands in rock history. But as his mental health declined and his substance use increased, something strange started happening on stage. He would stand perfectly still, not playing, not singing, just staring. Sometimes he would detune his guitar slowly, right in front of the audience, without acknowledging anyone. His bandmates eventually began bringing David Gilmour to shows to quietly play alongside him, then gradually in his place. Barrett drifted off stage and out of public life, largely without a dramatic ending. It just quietly stopped. His story remains one of the most genuinely heartbreaking in all of popular music.
Yippee! You can't see me, but I can.
Number 4. Scott Weiland, Stone Temple Pilots. Various shows through the late 1990s and 2000s. Weiland was one of the finest rock vocalists of his generation, and his bandmates spent years trying to hold things together despite his chronic impairment. Fans who attended STP shows during difficult stretches sometimes described him walking in circles, losing lyrics mid-song, or barely making it through a set. The band fired him, rehired him, and fired him again. He pursued solo work and other projects with similar struggles. Weiland passed away in late 2015. His talent was never really in question. The disease was.
As I'm trying to sleep, I got the
Number 5. Amy Winehouse, Belgrade, 2011.
Downstairs and I'm fine. You're rolled up sleeve.
This one is hard to watch, and many people who were there said the same. Winehouse had been booked for a European tour, and the Belgrade show was one of the opening dates. She walked on stage clearly unable to perform. She wandered, went quiet, leaned against band members, and at times seemed confused about where she was. The crowd, which had been excited, grew quiet and then frustrated. She was eventually helped off stage. Tour dates were canceled shortly after. Winehouse died just 2 months later, in July of 2011. She was 27 years old. The Belgrade show stands as a painful final chapter in a career that had produced some of the most soulful music of its decade.
Well, he'll sing, oh, safe bed.
Number 6. Shane MacGowan, The Pogues. Almost continuously through the 1980s and early 1990s, MacGowan is something of a special case because he functioned, sometimes brilliantly, at levels of impairment that would have put most performers flat on the floor. He wrote extraordinary songs. He fronted one of the most beloved Irish bands ever assembled. And yet the Pogues eventually had to make the painful decision to let him go, because the shows had become too unreliable. MacGowan himself never really disputed it. He lived long enough, surviving well into his 70s, to become something of a folk legend in his own right. But those who saw the late Pogues shows remember a performer operating somewhere far outside normal functioning. Number 7. Ozzy Osbourne, various shows through the 1980s. Osbourne had enough wild nights to fill several books, and many of them are well documented by his own admission. What stands out, beyond the famous stunts, is the sheer number of performances where bandmates, road managers, and crew members quietly steered him through the set by instinct and experience. Sharon Osbourne, his wife and manager, has spoken openly about this era. The miracle, she has said, is that so many of those shows still somehow worked, because the musicians around him were extraordinary, and because Ozzy, even far from his best, had a presence that filled arenas. Number 8. Courtney Love, various shows, mid to late 1990s. Love fronted Hole with genuine aggression and raw ability, but a number of her performances during this period were notable for all the wrong reasons. She sometimes showed up mid-set, sometimes fell off equipment, sometimes turned sets into extended confrontations with the audience. Whether this was performance art or something else was often debated. Some fans found it thrilling, others left early. What is clear is that the band around her, particularly guitarist Eric Erlandson, did a great deal of invisible work holding the music together on nights when Love was somewhere else. Number 9. Whitney Houston, various dates on her 2010 tour. By 2010, Houston's voice had been badly diminished by years of documented struggle, and some concert dates drew genuinely troubled reviews. Audiences in several cities reported that she seemed unwell, that her voice cracked repeatedly, and that she left the stage before finishing her set. Houston had been one of the most technically gifted singers in popular music history. Seeing her in those moments was described by fans who attended as genuinely heartbreaking. She passed away in early 2012. The 2010 tour is remembered as a difficult public chapter in a story that ended too soon. Number 10. Old Dirty Bastard, various shows and appearances through the late 1990s and early 2000s. ODB, born Russell Jones, was a founding member of Wu-Tang Clan and a performer of genuine originality. He was also chronically and openly impaired at many public appearances. He showed up to one Grammy broadcast on live television in a state that genuinely surprised the producers. He walked off stages, he started songs, and stopped. His behavior was sometimes attributed to mental health struggles, sometimes to substance use, and sometimes to both. He died in 2004, backstage at a Wu-Tang recording session, at 35 years old. Those who knew him described him as a complicated, warm, funny person whose illness ultimately overwhelmed him.
Slam. When it comes to the money, you wouldn't put it. That's what you gotta do, what you got to do.
If you have been with this channel a while, you know I do not tell these stories to mock anyone. Every one of the artists in this video was a real person dealing with real struggle, usually in front of thousands of strangers with cameras. The music industry of the 20th century did not exactly make it easy to ask for help. If you want to join the community where we talk about stories like this every week, hit the subscribe button. I read the comments and I answer questions. What all 10 of these moments share is this. There was a night when the performance fell apart. The mask came off, and the audience saw something raw and human instead of the polished star they had paid to see. Some of those nights produced strange, unexpected gifts, like a teenager named Scott Halpin sitting behind Keith Moon's drum kit and playing his heart out for strangers. Most just left people sad. This week, if you have a moment, leave a comment and tell me if you ever attended a concert that went sideways, where something unexpected happened and you still remember it decades later. Those stories are worth sharing. Next time, we will look at rock and pop stars who completely turned the tables and surprised fans in the best possible way. That one is a good counterweight to tonight. Thank you for watching. Take good care of yourselves.